are ready to rock and roll.
All right, am I supposed to go through this or?
Yeah, and Mr. Hendon, if you want to go through it, you don't have to necessarily read everything here because we will take the full report to the full board. So you can do a summary, but whatever you're comfortable with. And then, like I said, we'll have David go after that first main library project update. So take it away, whatever works for you.
And Paula, this is Molly real quick. One thing I want to point out is the numbers in here are still placeholders. We're still finalizing some of those GMP numbers. In total, we hope to be near the same, but I just wanted y'all to know that you might see a slightly different number in the final report once we finalize a few things. So sorry, Mr. Hendon, you can go ahead.
No problem. All right, so the first phase of the main library project includes replacement of the elevators to the south building and repair replacement of the Skylight. And there's the estimates have come in above. So in order to keep these projects moving, requesting authorization for the Eva Jane Remain CUM director to modify the current agreement with Turner Construction by GMP amends as follows. Elevator replacement GMP inclusive of CMR fee and CMR contingency equal to or less than $2,584,000. Skylight replacement GMP inclusive of CMR fee and CMR contingency equal to or less than $2,580,000. In addition, the elevator Skylight replacement, there have been investigations relating to Vine Street Plaza. Chapman also started a conceptual design process for the future service of the main library. This process includes robust engagement with staff, community, and a variety of stakeholders over the next several months. Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hendon. And David, I'm gonna set this up. If you want to introduce yourself to folks, you and Jay, and I will make it so, David, you can share your screen.
Sounds great. Jay, why don't you start with the intros?
My name's Jay Derenthal with Champlin Architecture. We're the architects of record for the main library work.
Rick, when you go.
Rick Espy, I'm principal with MKSK. We're a landscape architecture firm.
And
Cincinnati and Columbus.
And I'm David Schnee, principal in charge at Group 4 Architecture Research and Planning, and now a teammate to Champlin here. And it's been almost a year since, a little over a year since I had the opportunity, Jay and I, to meet with you all talking about the FMP. And it's great to meet you, Greg, now virtually, and to see the rest of you from the committee here, and excited to make a very brief presentation and get your input on a couple of items before we come to the full board at the next meeting. So I'm going to share my screen, and let's see, and go to play. Do you see the title slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. We'll just jump right in. Okay, so just 4 topics to talk about the main library scope overall, to put it into the conceptual design work into the context of budgeting and phasing. Then Rick's going to jump in and give you a little bit of teasers on Vine Street, and we'll just give you a little bit of an update on the engagement internally and externally. So the main library scope here will just take you back to the origins of this particular chunk of work as part of the 10-year next generation plan. So improving wayfinding was one of the big goals for the main Vine Street Plaza. The gauntlet, the problem of design that you have now, which is all so familiar and sort of universally held to as something that really should be improved. How for a long time you guys have been looking at dropping the plaza, and that idea really resonated when we met with the community, and this is the type of work we're doing. The wayfinding needs visual identity and new stairs. Of course, the elevator and Skylight is part of that. And we also included in the master plan what we called a reorganization / light makeover of a portion of the public spaces here. And so that's the general scope. Not funded internally, but as an opportunity that's been on the sort of radar for a long time, is the idea of a public-private partnership, and similar to the Court Street Kroger project down the street, wondering if the Walnut Street frontage has opportunities to provide much requested parking and or an auditorium or other pieces. And so we're just trying to keep that on the radar as well. Jay, can you?
Some of the first steps in this process that we left off with in the facilities master plan are to be looking at the elevators and the skylight in the main library. You can see there in blue is shown where the atrium is, and that's the general footprint of the skylight. And then the yellow highlighted areas on the floor plan show where the elevators are located. So we'll be replacing elevators in the 80s building, and we'll be replacing elevators in the 50s building as well. We'll be mothballing 2 of those elevators in the 50s building. So it's termed a modernization. We're not going to be doing anything to the elevator shafts, but we will be renovating all of the systems and the controllers and so forth. We'll also be updating slightly some of the interior finishes relating to the elevators. You can see there on the left-hand side in the 50s building, there's 2 elevator doors that we'll be removing. And we'll be replacing it with something that hopefully will be helpful to the wayfinding in the library. We don't know exactly what that is yet, but it'll be some sort of form of graphics there. And on the right, that is the 80s building, of course. We'll be adding new finishes there to update and help some of the brick that's aged there.
And Jay, just for clarification, one of those that Jay has mentioned that we're mothballing, one is a public elevator from the 50s, but the other is actually a very small staff elevator that is from the 50s and is has never been used by the public. So just a little bit of clarification for those. Some of you may know that, but that's a little inside baseball.
Yeah, and through, just to extend that a little bit, so through the elevator consultant that we hired, we determined based on the data that we really didn't need those other 2 elevators. We'd still be able to accommodate all of the traffic that we need in the future. So it felt like that was the right move there. Moving on to the skylight, there's been difficulties with the existing skylight in terms of leakage and not being, just by virtue of its configuration, not being able to get up there, the maintenance crew, and really clean it out and really be able to clean it properly, to get on it, to access it. So we've basically gone through a process of trying to reconfigure it so that it's much more suitable in terms of maintenance, but also I think elevating and changing the aesthetic look of it as well. So you can see the section through the building shows how it will be configured. Through evaluation of cost, we determined that we could keep the existing beams and save some money there. And so that's kind of what we've done. And we feel like we haven't compromised the design solution, the design direction, but we've tried to be frugal with the dollars there. So we're going to be tweaking a little bit the aesthetic of the skylight and creating a bit of a new feel, I think, especially in the upper area of the atrium space.
Great. Thanks, Jay. So moving, any questions on the skylight before we move on to the second topic? Okay.
It's Monica. Can I ask a question? And I'm sorry if this has already been answered at some point. Tell me again how we got from our original $2.5 million placeholder to $6.3 million. I know it's 5 years later, but that seems like an awfully big bump.
I can add a little bit there, because those numbers were really just placeholders for like when they did the elevators, they just looked at the cost of the elevator, not all of the additional work that went into it. And, we've all learned a lot during the process, and Jay could probably speak a little bit more to this. And the Skylight was just really a wild guess. Like, what do we think it's going to be to repair it to stop it from leaking? And then once we got into, well, what does that look like? It really just became a lot more work. So they were just bad estimates from the beginning. It's hard to say that there was a lot of numbers behind them. Does that
I-
help, Monica?
Yes, Molly.
I think another thing, and Jay, you may want to speak to this, on the Skylight alone, when we brought in the engineer and did a lot of work around that, just replacing the mechanism by which to support that was much more extensive. And this is a modification for the budget dollars from what we'd hoped we might be able to do because of the steel support and other things in that. Jay, you can talk more technically about this, but in the actual structure and framework of the Skylight, it's designed in a way that we are trying to use the existing steel beams and you can see them a little bit in this picture, and put some supports there so as to save dollars around actually getting into the brick and restructuring all of the steel.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Paula. I think the assumption with the Skylight was that there was the hope that we could simply replace sort of the components and leave the structure, leave the form the same as it was. And I think as we dug into that a little bit more, we really started to uncover the inherent difficulties of keeping that form. And so to really solve the problem, for the next, 10, 20, 30 years, we really needed to look at changing the form of the Skylight to make it more maintenance free over the next couple of years. So that, I think we started from a position that really was, I think we just didn't want to be there. We wanted to extend it and make it a little bit more maintenance friendly.
I have a question too. I assume in here that when it was, I don't know for sure when it was originally installed, were we using solar panels then? And has that increased the cost at all because it's going to be a different type of panels?
Well, it was originally built in the 80s, the early 80s. And the glass technology that was used, we have far superior glass technology now, of course. And so that will help from a heat gain standpoint and insulation standpoint. That's absolutely right. We feel like this is really a tremendous upgrade. And I think we've been cognizant of the dollars and sort of balancing something that'll work, but not go extravagantly, the other way either.
So does that mean we're using solar in there? I didn't quite.
I'm sorry.
Are
Yeah,
we going to be using solar technology
there
in
were
this?
no solar panels,
Yeah, okay.
but the new glass will be much more of a high performance glass than was available in the early 80s.
Right. Okay. Excellent.
These are really great questions, and that's why we wanted to make sure that we present it to you, because the dollars in a building like the main library, we've seen it kind of on a smaller scale with Price Hill and Walnut Hills. Renovation is something that really, you're never sure what it's going to look like. So, and I anticipate, I don't want to speak out of turn or be pessimistic, but I anticipate that the main library will just be a project that has many of these things that when we get into it, the cost is not knowable at this point, because I did not expect the steel issues around that Skylight. We've never really looked at that Skylight. These are things that we're discovering. So I wanted to make sure everybody kind of had an idea about the scope of what we're talking about. These are just maintenance repairs, and so they cost what they cost. But other things as we move forward will perhaps have some of the same issues around them. And we just want to make sure we're as transparent as we can about what we're facing on the buildings here. And I do think that these changes and upgrades will be substantial. So we will be altering this generationally. So hopefully we're doing it in a manner that people won't have to re-examine or revisit these long-standing maintenance issues for 25, 35, 45 years, that these are solid solutions that really work.
I presume for maintenance, you can walk on the glass?
That's correct. Yes.
But Bob, Mr. Hendon, I also want to point out, and Jeff, who you all know, Jeff Garine, who heads up our facilities, the trying to do maintenance on that skylight as it is right now is just epically difficult. I happened to walk out there and talk to some of his team who were looking at it one morning, and it's just, they have to try and walk along the existing supports there. It's
Yeah.
really difficult to clear. So that's an important point for everyone to understand. This is not really something that's terribly functional right now.
And so this ends up being a perfect segue, asking that question, Monica, and the follow-up questions to the budgeting and phasing. And so the master plan level was looking at all facilities at a very, very pre-conceptual level. It was really about needs and putting placeholder numbers to it. And the conceptual design phase that we're in now, in addition to the elevator and skylights, his purpose is to try to get better budgeting information so that we can give you tools for determining which projects go forward when. And so that's what this next piece will be. So first of all, for the 10-year proposed projects, we had the graphic that you had seen before that had all the different images of the libraries by their proportion of area, with, of course, the main library being 53% and all the other branches 47% of your area. But if you look at what the 10-year proposed investments were, Maine was only getting less than a quarter of that, and all the branches were getting so much more. And we had presented to the board in 2019, just when you have all these facilities, you have responsibilities for all of them looking long-term, and that there are a lot of precedents in Ohio and around the nation of people. Our main libraries still have a long-term future, and communities around the nation are saying yes. People said, with COVID, do the main libraries have a future? And we worked with staff over in the past months through the pandemic, and indeed the large size of the main library provides unique resources that no other branch can have, and so still is the long-term future looks bright, and one that looks at long-term investments. And so we knew that beyond what issue 3 provided, there were needs that would be significantly beyond that, and one of the big parts of the master plan was looking at how to prioritize and make sure there were at least strategic investments everywhere, and all the maintenance projects and the elevator and skylights were part of that. And so we just have to remember, sort of as we're getting more realistic budgets, that we want to still make sure that every investment we do today is good for more than a generation. It's the next generation plan, so we're looking ahead to the future generations, and so that for each dollar that you direct being spent, that we want to make sure what's going to happen after 10 years and after 20 years, and that it has lasting value, and that when we have the opportunity through new funding strategies, how will other unmet needs be addressed. So let's see, I think we just, Jay, was this your side or mine? What did I mark you as?
I can speak to this, David.
Mhm.
In addition to the elevator and the skylight project, we also did a quick study of what it would take from a structural and architectural and MEP standpoint to lower the plaza out on Vine Street, that elevated plaza, which is elevated about 5 feet above the first floor elevation. And so we looked at ways in which we could do that, what it might impact. And there are a few areas where there would be impact to the structure and to the curtain wall there. But I think in large measure, this is something we need to come to grips with. There's the possibility of filling in the space beneath, that is the basement level beneath the plaza, instead of building out or continuing to add waterproofing as we lower that plaza level. So we've done that study, and that is sort of preliminary to looking at what the design options are for the plaza.
And related to that, of course, is the elevated plaza has its counterpart in the interior, the mezzanine with the ramp and stair, which are all parts of the wayfinding and space use. And so in this next, we're going to just play a little video. This is not landscape design and not architectural design. So anyone watching this, please know that. But we want to, the big picture and context is looking for the north building and its frontage on Vine Street. Now, what happens if you just imagine this being lowered here? It's a brand new opportunity here. And if we move the entryway, and as Jay was talking about, there's new opportunities for glazing here. We know there's concerns about how there aren't enough sort of eyes, and it's a little bit dark on 9th Street under the bridge. And so ignore any of the details here, Rick. This is Rick is cringing because these were done by the architects before we got Rick started here, just to show that we really have this wonderful opportunity for this open space that Rick's going to talk about briefly. And here, what we don't have at all is greater visibility to the interior and these indoor-outdoor connections with bringing the glazing down, really having ways that support every member of the community in different ways, and having a much stronger visual connection here. We talk about and have, we'll be looking at part of this, how to make the, and part of the reorganization of public spaces is doing a dramatic rearrangement and having the main library have some of the multi-generational uses much more like a branch, and so making it more friendly to, while still having it be a county-wide destination, and these indoor-outdoor connections and the whole existing spatial flow in the building is something that many of you said, boy, I didn't realize we had all of this great, this two-story space right as you enter, with the second-story bridge, and the elevator upgrades, trying to help identify those in the future, perhaps with color, and some form of way to create a new stair that might be in support of the large events that happen occasionally, and that this all is being done as the Skylight, and Jay was doing it. You saw that it had a gable that was asymmetrical, and that was picking up and reinforcing the future branding and graphics that would be on the what's shown here as a placeholder, the blue elevator core. And so seeing how that you having now stairs that can connect you really for the long term will allow people to connect and use the library. So hopefully this is way past a lot of things you see here is beyond the current scope for sure, but we want to have that thought, what are those opportunities in the future? And so to get back down to a little bit, our main focus here is the Vine Street Plaza, and I'm going to turn it over to, oops, what happened there? There we go. There we go. Oops. I don't know why it's blacking out. Let's see. I don't know why that side's blacking out. I'm going to bring it over. And okay, why don't we start with just jump right in there, Rick.
Okay. I'm not seeing your screen, David, so.
Oh, maybe that was the problem. Hold on 1 second. Let's see. Do you see that?
Yep, now we see it.
Great.
Yeah, as David said, I think the importance of the library and its location within the context of downtown Cincinnati is really important. When you think about Vine Street and its connectivity from over the Rhine and the nearby Washington Park all the way down to the riverfront, it really becomes the central meridian that runs through the city of Cincinnati, connecting Fountain Square, Piat Park, the future Court Street, which is under construction. And the benefit is that the library sits right about midpoint. And so if you think about these great spaces in Cincinnati, how the library is really another piece of that urban context, another piece of that urban framework, which really creates a connective tissue all the way through the city of Cincinnati. And then specifically, when you look at the library itself, it's more than just the Vine Street Plaza, right? There's a number of open spaces from the reading room to the North Garden and as well as the exterior patio spaces up on the upper levels that really create a really wonderful opportunity for the library, connecting Piat Park and Court Street toward the north. I think it's really a great opportunity. Court Street, for those of you who don't know, is currently under construction. They're removing the center parking aisles and widening out the sidewalks. They see Court Street as becoming very full of art, very artful. They see it as a gathering space, as a place to do festivals and events and things like that. And as you can see in the lower right-hand image here, it's actually under construction. So this is another additive piece to that urban fabric that the library will can really complement.
Back in 2018, the trustees established these principles for the master planning process, and we are requesting the full board create guiding principles for the Vine Street Plaza and outdoor spaces. Rick, do you want to, and we'd like your input on which ones to bring to the full board. This is a longer list that we'd like you to select down. And Rick?
Exactly, David. I think just like you did for the interior, we'd like a similar kind of rating of these guiding principles. We know all of these are important to the library, but we want to kind of judge which ones are most important. We know that accessibility and universal accessibility is important. Safety, we know the gauntlet that you have to run today to get inside the front door of the library. We want the plaza to be welcoming and inviting, civic-minded. It's really community space. It needs to be flexible for a number of different events. It needs to be active, not just at lunchtime, but throughout the day. Technology is important. Is it just Wi-Fi that comes into the plaza, or is it something else? There's some additional connectivity pieces. We always want to be sustainable. And that's a three-legged stool in our minds. It's environmentally sustainable, fiscally and operationally sustainable, and socially sustainable. And as we, are in this period of COVID and Black Lives Matter, how does that social sustainability, inclusive and diverse, really, what does that mean to the library? It wants to be Cincinnati. This is not Columbus. This is not Texas. This is Cincinnati. And what does a plaza in Cincinnati really want to be? Art is very important. It wants to be very artful. It wants to be a destination, as we were mentioning, along that linear meridian that runs through the city. It wants to be a place to come, vibrant, connective, and does it want to be world class? So I think if you can think about these things and start to rate these things 1 to 10 on what's most important to you, that would be really helpful to us.
So we'll be coming back to the full board meeting, and we had worked out with you, Diane, that this would be an activity that we would do, and like we had done for the master plan, you guys will rank them. Are there any other ones that you at this point would like to add to it? And until the board meeting, there's opportunities, and even at the board meeting, for any trustee to add anything. But anything come to mind at the moment?
Yeah, I just have a question. I was looking at the rendition, and I was thinking, it looks like 1,000 people. I mean, how many, have you done an estimate of what are the numbers of people who could be gathered in this space? Seating, standing. Has anybody done that?
We have not done that yet, but that's part of what the next steps will be, is really, looking at the different events, the different size events. It has to work every day in terms of a plaza, and it has to be comfortable for a few people sitting out there, but it also wants to be large enough to do a gathering, to do a movie night, to do a little concert,
So cool.
So I think, that flexibility of space is what we're really looking for.
So you can, as Rick had said, you can think about if there are any other values. And Paula, how much more time would you like us to spend here? I know you have other agenda items, and trustees have other restrictions.
We have maybe, if you have 7 more minutes.
Okay, fantastic. So.
Yeah, we can run through this very quickly. Just looking at Vine Street and the programming, this is just a slide talking about other places that have happened around the country, and what some of those other opportunities are that the library has programmed. And I think when we talk about programming, It's looking at the library programming and what may come outside from what's inside today, but it's also public-private partnerships and what relationships can you create in the city that may also activate the space outside. Next. And what are those activities? You know, is it book carts coming outside? Is it fountains? Is it reading rooms for people? Next. Is it playful? Is it artful? You know, here you see some swings that were in one library space, exterior space. Is it full of games like cornhole? And lighting becomes a really important piece to this, to make it safe at night, but also to make it fun. From blackboards to art to food carts. And also in the lower left-hand corner, respite spaces, some quiet spaces that you can be alone in quiet time. And then the exterior spaces, what is the form of those? Are they tree covered and shady? Are they open and sunny? What are the materiality of the spaces, from wood decks to more hardscape? Next. To paving patterns, and how does that start to read throughout the city? Is it something that's kind of staid and formal? Is it something that's more informal, as in the right-hand image? Or is it something that's very playful and very artful, you know, where we use color in the plaza spaces itself? And then what are some of those elements that occur, you know, the structures that may be in the plaza space, from canopies over the doors to shade structures. This is a west-facing plaza, so the sun is going to become important, and creating shaded areas for people to sit is very important. To artful spaces, you know, is those shade structures something that becomes a piece of art and really creates an interest in a focal point for the plaza itself? And then what are some of those other elements, you know, from large tables to reclining chairs to bocce to table tennis? What are those other things that you might want to see out in this plaza? What's going to activate this space? And what is going to also be something that, you know, from sunshades to wooded areas, what are those opportunities that occur out in the space itself?
That was a great teaser, Rick, and we can pause for, so we're going to be taking these types of teasers and things and getting community and staff input in this phase, so that we've teased out during the master plan all of these opportunities. And we had 90 plus meetings during the facility master plan, and over the next couple of months we have coming to you on the 9th for the full board meeting, and then on the 10th, 11th, and 12th meeting with main staff on the 18th and the 25th, having opportunities to meet with stakeholders similar to our community advisory committee we had before, and the general public forum, just so that people know as these works coming, and to help that we're exploring these things, to temper expectations. We want to have people think big, but understand that we're going to be doing this initial phase to figure out what is affordable within the budgets, and to give you guys tools. So questions, comments on any of that?
I have a couple questions. This is Greg Olson. In terms, and I want to get back to Monica's initial question, back to budget. So we started off with placeholder. Can you hear me all?
Yep.
Okay, $2.5 million, and now we're looking at 6.1 million for two different projects. We have already selected a general contractor. I'm not typically accustomed to that in my business. We typically have a pretty good idea of where the costs are going to come in, and then we have the bid process that helps us decide on who's going to help us value engineer and decide where we're going to go. At this point in time, are we saying that Turner we're relying on them to value engineer along with Champlin to help us get those costs down to 2.5 million each? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, yes, Turner is on board. They're doing costing and value engineering. They've been involved with the process. We've gone through several iterations on the Skylight to get the cost down. And we've gone through cost-cutting measures with the elevators as well, Greg. So yeah, they're involved. We're in the middle of the process. with the Skylight.
So are you accustomed, Jay, are you accustomed to doing it that way, where you pick a general contractor who says, we're going to help you just drive the cost down, but not have competitive bidding to get there?
Well, they're a construction manager. This is kind of their typical role, is to shepherd the process through. Now, yes, they are at risk. They're a construction manager at risk. But yeah, this is,
Presuming that we all agree on a new budget though, right?
Well, and this is Molly, so I'll jump in because this is, the 2.5 million was just wrong to start with. So I don't
That's
want to
okay,
get too
Molly. Molly,
focused
I
on.
understand that. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it was just not a good number. We have about, I think 12.5 million, maybe a little more. There's different components of the FMP for life cycle replacements. And when we were putting a number to it, Jeff said, when we priced these out in 2016, this is about where we were. So we can get to where we need to be from a budget standpoint with the overall life cycle improvement dollars. I'm not concerned about that. And I agree with what you're saying, but the CMR model and the models we're using now are all new to us. So yeah, we did hire Turner, but I do feel that we've had Champlin involved, we've had Group 4 involved. We're working with JS Held. So before we even hired Turner, we knew that the 2.5 was probably too low. Once JS Held came in and started running some estimates of what those costs were going to be, and when Jay and his team got the elevator people involved last, July, August, we knew those numbers were not the best numbers. So,
Molly, and there is competitive bidding with the CM at risk. There are certain things that were established, and there was competitive selection of them for it, but all their subcontracting work will be open book competitive, and if they self-perform, they have to do it in a way that the library and JS Held are doing it sort of at arm's length, so that there is still getting competition.
Yes, 100%. And we have spent, and Jay can probably attest to this as well as Paula, hours and hours and hours of meetings on these topics and these subjects just to make sure that we're informed and we're making the best decisions. So I don't want it to become about how bad the original budget was, because
that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just, normally, if I do a third party bid with let's say with 3CDC, they have multiple general GCs working on that bid, trying to figure out the best way to design the residential multifamily retail space. And so they're thinking of it in a variety of ways.
Right.
And they typically pick somebody, and then they say, this is where we think the budget's going to be. And they might say, well, that's still too high. Can you still value engineer? And eventually they pick someone.
Right.
So that's just one example. And that happened on Main Street on a project we're working on with him. I'm just not accustomed to seeing us pick. And I was a part of the process of picking Turner. So I'm not saying that I'm just surprised to see that we have a floating number still. We're at 3.1 where the numbers came in, and now we're saying, well, we need to get it to 2.5. And
yeah, well, I don't think we're going to get it to 2.5. I mean, I don't think. I think if we can keep them at the overall 6.3, I would be happy with that number. And one thing,
how do we know that's a number to be happy with, Molly? That's all I'm saying, is how do we know that 6.3 is a number we should be happy with?
Well, I think that, and I think that that's why we have all the people on the team, and we've gone through every option and looked at all the considerations. I think once we get through all of that, and that we know what the design is, and that's what we need. But one thing I want to take 1 second is, so historically, when we've done any kind of project, we've hired the architect first, and we've come up with some estimates. And anybody that's been here a long time knows that when we come up with these estimates, and then when we go out to bid, there's still a gap between what we thought it was going to be and what it really is. So I feel like we're doing the process much better this time. We just probably put that 2.5 number out there too early.
Yeah, I understand. I'm not worried. Like I said, I'm not worried about, I feel like you think I'm talking about the 2.5. I'm not. I'm talking about where we think the number is today and how we did it. We want people to compete, and obviously there'll be subs that are competing to drive it down, but we have to make sure that that's, as a board, as this committee, are doing everything we can to drive those numbers down. And
Right.
competition does that. I mean, you've
Right.
seen that with the rest of our agenda today, who has
Right.
bid on certain things at different branches, and the lowest bid's winning in a lot of cases. I know
Right.
that's very so that's kind of where my head is, and that's where we head with the rest of the main library. I want to take I want to be a part of that approach,
Right.
and look at it a little differently.
Yeah. So I don't know,
completely
David or Jay, if
understand
you have
the
any.
2.5.
Yeah, that's Greg. This is exactly the purpose for, rather than just treating even Vine Street as a maintenance thing and say, hey, we're just going to do it and let's figure out what it costs. All the assessments that Jay said originally from the structural and civil there, and this conceptual design is to look comprehensively. What will that stair cost? What will the new facade cost? Let's have better numbers for it. And very possibly these are going to be, or I'm almost assuredly, we're going to identify costs that are greater than available resources. And so what then that does is provides a tool for what you're talking about, and the rest of the trustees are about what provides the best value and how do you phase it? What's the right priority for now? And so rather than coming in and trying to chase a number that we put out earlier to say, oh, we put a placeholder for X million for this and that, what can we design for that? We'll look to see what are less expensive options and things, but what is the right sort of investment that needs to happen, and that in April we'll be coming back to you with some tools and say, these are what we think might be reasonable, getting your and other input, and then you'll figure out, okay, what with available resources is the right amount. And so we manage expectations until that time is it's all waiting for that input.
And I will say that things like really looking at the elevators, the number of elevators we needed. We didn't go into the project assuming we would decommission any elevators, but when we did work, we took a look at where we could save dollars on the design elements. So the overall main library project, this may be an element that is slightly more due to some structural things that, again, it's news to me about how that skylight worked and the amount of steel and getting into the brick and all of these things. But we have other elements that we can then have perhaps more ability to value engineer realistically for a good outcome that are not so structural in nature. So I think it's a really important question. And again, bringing everyone into the discussion to get input so that we have the best avenue forward and thinking about it. Obviously the innovative service and designs are important, but so is the manner in which we approach it from a budget and phasing standpoint. And that can be, I think, a little confusing to our public about phasing things in. We have these ideas and we have to plan and try and look at them. But if it takes us 4 and 5 years to get to things, the dollar amounts and what's possible also changes. So we're trying to engage and set expectations appropriately while we still develop them. So Greg, Molly and I can certainly talk with you a little bit more to get your ideas. I think those are really important questions, and stewardship is a big part of what we're doing. So we do need to think through that. Again, to your point, not just about this element, but as we move forward, how we can ensure that we're doing that appropriately to get the best product we can on what's surely going to be a substantial project over many years.
I agree with all that. And
yeah, so we can talk because
I wouldn't have done it that way. And I'm just putting my opinion out there. I just have I would have done it differently. So with that being said, I'm looking forward to what transpires going forward and being a part of observing the value engineer process, and at least of the skylight as well as the elevator bank. And as we go forward into the rest of the main library, I think the vision that the Champlain guys are put together is absolutely 100% the direction we need to go in, because creating that outdoor space and making people feel like this is where they need to be and enjoy and then tying it into the Court Street. Couldn't agree more, guys. And I just think that's outstanding. So, but I definitely want to look at it, be a much closer part of the process going forward.
Yeah, and Greg, I think, and to the trustees and with this, the Turner and with JS Held, I think we can explicitly ask the question, what might be other strategies to accomplish these goals? Other than just maybe what the architects are showing, and we'll open this up to all of you as well. What if we were to abandon something or to try some other technique? We're trying to be creative with it too and economical in what we're planning, but the process of more minds make for sometimes new solutions is definitely something that we're happy to get input on.
And then the rest of my comments revolve around, what our mission, vision, and values type thing, principles, guiding principles are. I like the inclusion and diversity. I think those words should be first, as opposed to social responsibility being the first two words, because I think those are words that people are going to look for first. I mean, everybody's going to look for those words, but besides that, it's just moving the words around. But I think you guys did a really nice job of picking out principles for us all to select from. Yeah.
Thanks, Greg.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Greg.
You're welcome.
Greg,
Okay.
as a longtime board member, I really appreciate your input, and I'm glad you're on the board. You bring a
this
lot of
is-
experience, and I think you'll help us tremendously.
This is a big project any way you slice it. So
We
we're
have-
open to making them.
We have really good
That's-
advisors here. These guys from Champlin really know what they're doing. So that's important to me. And JS Held, we use them for our to value engineer and to help us understand where we're starting on everything we do, because they know what they're doing. So thanks for the thoughts. I'm looking forward to working really closely with this board. I like it. I like you folks, and I think the leadership at the library is outstanding.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, that's a great way to sort of wind up our conversation here. We can always add additional questions. We told Jay and Rick and David that to present here and do as detailed a dive as we could with the committee so that we bring it to the full board. It might be a little bit of a tightened up presentation, and any input additionally that you think of, we'll be sure to pass that along because they will be back talking with the full board. I think that we can move on to the next part. And, Jay, David, you're welcome to stay, but I also know that you have other things to do. So if you sign off, we'll follow up with you guys later.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paula, are we
Thank
going
you.
to try to approve 2.5 million for both projects, even though Molly thinks we're at 3.1 on both of them today?
We're not approving anything today. This is just
Okay.
what we're going to say to the full board. Now, when we bring
So-
it to the full board,
Why
that will
would
be
we
a
say
discussion
2.5?
that we will have.
Yeah, I don't think we want to say 2.5. If Molly thinks we're at 3.1, and it says on our committee notes that we're proposing 2.5 for both, right?
For
Well,
each.
those are the
Yeah.
GMP amounts
Yes.
that would need the approval. The total projects are 3.2 and 3.1 right now. The GMP is a component of the total budget.
Okay, I
Because
think we
there
just
are
need to be clear
additional
about
budget
that to the board. I think we need to be clear about that to the board so they know that, well, we're talking 2.5 is GMP, but there's also additional costs that surround that gets us to the 6.3 total, right, Molly? Okay.
Yes, yeah, and that's in that first paragraph,
All right.
yes.
Maybe I just didn't read it close
But
enough.
it's confusing, and Molly and I talked about that. So maybe we can be more explicit because, again, this is all kind of confusing. It can be confusing just because there's so many numbers, to make sure that we're as explicit as we can about what we're talking about. So that's something we can pull out or at least speak to directly at the full board meeting.
Great.
Absolutely.
All right,
Okay.
let's move on to the Madisonville branch project. In August 2019, the library selected Megan Construction as a CMR for both Walnut Hills branch and Madisonville branch accessibility projects. In June 2020, the library selected GBBN Architects as design professional for Lease build out projects 2024. And the decision to continue these firms for Madisonville is at the library's discretion. We recommend moving forward with both firms for the Madisonville project in order to meet the timeline established for the Lease. We intend to begin the design process, which will include community and staff engagement in spring of 2021. Any
And
questions?
I think Nadine had mentioned you had something maybe you wanted to speak to on this one.
Actually, it may be part of the conversation
Okay.
regarding the newspaper article
Gotcha.
and
Okay.
how the community feels really about the development group. So I don't know that it fits in right here.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Hendon. Go on.
All right. All right, Deer Park branch lease build out. January 2021, the bids were open for this project. Was responsible bidder Perkins Carmack with a bid of $2,941,000, included all 5 alternates. The bid is $31,000 less than the published estimate. Request approval of Deer Park construction budget, including the contingency of 10%. The overall project budget inclusive of furniture, fixtures, equipment, and technology is $5 million. We're also requesting authorization for the director to approve change orders that do not increase the overall budget and to execute the certificate of substantial completion. All change orders will be reported to the board for confirmation. We expect the contracting details to be resolved in mid-February. Landlord is continuing with demo that required abatement and is working to replace the roof. We anticipate construction to begin as soon as the agreement is executed. All right, then there's 2020 annual appropriations. Monica,
You want me to do that?
yes, please.
Yeah, so
Molly,
at
you wanna do that?
Yeah, at the December board meeting, the board authorized revisions to the appropriations as needed to get us through till the end of the year for the CARES Act grant fund. So in order to wrap that fund up for the end of the year, we needed to make one change, increasing supplies by 6,500, increasing purchased and contracted services by 2,500, and then decreasing capital outlay by 67.5. And we just need to have confirmation of that revision. It's already been reported to the county. I can go on, and then the revision of the permanent fund trust balances. You guys approved the changes for 2020 at the December board meeting, and right after the board meeting, we got another donation of $995 to the Legacy Fund. So we are asking to increase that fund balance to 4,495 as of 12/31. Do you want me to keep going?
Yes, please.
Okay. So subsequent to the December 2020 board meeting, we received updated PLF estimate for 2021. The revised estimate is 4,540 or 554,783 over the previously reported. This estimate puts us pretty much in line with what the 2020 original estimate was. So now we're at $41,728,743. And then when we were submitting the resources to the county, we discovered a clerical error. So we need to increase the Dana Fund estimated earnings by $500. These things need just confirmation at the board meeting. They've already been reported to the county. In addition, we learned that the estimated cost for the bipolar ionization was less than had been predicted. So there are small changes in the CARES Act grant fund that will need approval. One is to allocate the interest earnings, and then the other is to align the rest of the supplies expenditures so we can wrap up that fund. The fund was extended through the end of 2021, but we're hoping to have it wrapped up by the end of the first quarter. Then the authorization to transfer funds. This is just an annual requirement that we need to authorization to move. Who was it? Okay, so we moved 22
Sylvia
million.
just woke up.
Oh, okay. $22,500,000 will move as the funding permits during the year from the general fund to the building and repair fund. And we'll need your authorization so that we can do that. And then another thing after the board meeting, Fifth Third came back to us and was not in agreement with the resolution that we've used for many, many years. So attached is a resolution that they're requesting we get signed so that we can continue with our relationship with them. That's again, just kind of a thing we need to have taken care of. And then confirmation of the one change order on the energy retrofit. This is a deduct for some allowances that weren't used that are coming back to us. So Mr. Hendon, if you want to go ahead and take the rest of the things there.
And Mr. Hendon, I think you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself? Let me see.
Yep, okay. All right, for the energy retrofit update, confirmation is requested for following change order. preferred fire protection, the amount of $30,776. Fire suppression. Now, for information only, Price Hill Branch Accessibility Project. The exterior of the new branch is almost complete with the installation of windows, lighting, and landscaping being wrapped up. On the interior, finishes are being completed. The elevator installation is in process. Furniture and technology installation expected to be in mid-February. Branch is scheduled to be completed this spring with a target date the end of March. The opening will follow shortly thereafter. We anticipate complete list of change orders presented at the April 2021 board meeting.
And I don't
Walnut-
know, Mr. Hendon, just a real quick point of information. I don't know if anyone has had a chance to drive down Warsaw or look at the Price Hill construction. Just driving by on Warsaw and some of the side streets, it is remarkable. The way that the branch is is much more prominent and noticeable and sort of changes the dynamic, particularly from the back view, not from Warsaw. I can't remember that back street right now, but it's really interesting. And I encourage you all to just, if you're in that neighborhood, to drive by on a day when there isn't snow or slush, because it is quite stunning to me, having grown up on the west side of town in particular, the difference. And I think just driving around the block is really worth doing. Thank you.
All right, the Walnut Hills Branch Accessibility Project update. GMP agreement with Megan Construction was signed in early January. The final guaranteed maximum price is $9,312,608, which is $135,091 less than reported at the December 2020 board meeting. This decrease is a result of value engineering. The permit has been issued and job site is being mobilized and interior demolition is underway. Molly, you want to take us through the 2020 year-end summary?
Absolutely.
I can't see it on mine. Can we roll up to that? Oh,
Sure. Sorry about that. I'm reading in paper and on screen. So thank you,
Okay.
Nadine. Thank you, Judge Allen.
So the table below represents the final 2020 available balances that were reported to the county in January. The variance from December 2020 report are all the results of overall favorable actual activity compared to estimates. So the ending carry forward out of the general fund was $21,665,000. And the estimated resources in the appropriations remain the same. We were just a little bit ahead across the board on all of the available balances.
I do want to quickly speak to this. I did talk with the other directors of major metro libraries in Ohio, and this is not atypical of some of the balances that they have remaining as well.
Do you want me to go on, Mr. Hendon, or do you want to?
Sure, go right ahead until you get
Okay.
time.
Okay, so the 2020 capital maintenance update. In February 2020, we reported there were 8 locations that had been prioritized for carpet and paint, and we're calling those branch refreshes during the first half of the FMP. And in spite of the pandemic, we were able to complete College Hill, Elmwood Place, Groesbeck, and Madeira during 2020. And going forward, the next 4 locations are Anderson, Coreyville, Green Township, and Sharonville. We are currently working on the scope definition for both Anderson and Coreyville. Coreyville is a little bit different because, as we've reported in the past, there is a fair amount of waterproofing work that needs to happen at Coreyville that will most certainly put that in a little bit different category than some of the other projects. And in addition, we are reviewing the improvement needs for the Hyde Park branch, which needs interior renovations, elevator maintenance, and exterior maintenance. We do have a gift we received several years ago that we are able to put towards those repairs, but that's going to be another one that is a little bit larger in scope than some of the smaller refreshes.
All right,
Paula,
good.
did you want to talk about Blue Ash at all?
Sure. Very briefly, the Blue Ash City leadership, along with some developers of a significant piece of property there in downtown Blue Ash, approach a library about being part of that new development. At this point, we're learning more about the project and the details. If you can remember from the FMP, we initially put in there a concept of maybe a different kind of branch out in the Summit area, the Summit development in Blue Ash. That is not going to happen for a variety of reasons. And certainly the community had a lot of input about maintaining our presence in the downtown Blue Ash area. I did want to alert you to this in case it were to come up at a Blue Ash City Council meeting, that the library has been invited for some discussions. Again, nothing substantial, but I didn't want anyone to be surprised. Earlier in mid-year last year, they had done some work on the piece of property across the street for their own purposes of planning, and they had a couple of options that they presented to the community, I think at a community council meeting or city council meeting. And one of them they actually called the library option. And we were not aware. I think Diane had seen it. Now I've since talked to them, and that's not something they're pursuing, but I didn't want anyone to be surprised if that came up at a meeting or a developer mentioned that. Again, we have very little information and have just learned of the opportunity.
All right, now there are changes in the facility department. In mid-December, our capital project manager submitted his resignation and returned to his former employer. As circumstances would have it, we consider ourselves fortunate to have hired Kristen Payne, formerly one of the architects working with us, Representative Fishback in his role, this role. During that time, we were evaluating department needs going into 2021, also in planning for FMP capital projects, branch refreshes, life cycle replacements, along with routine facility maintenance, ongoing requests for small projects. We determined there is a need to increase the resources of the facilities department. The new role will provide direct oversight of the maintenance and HVAC areas and provide another level of support for all library staff in providing service. This will provide the entire department the ability to allocate resources necessary for all projects and routine maintenance. We have hired Angela Peterson for this position. Angela was the construction manager at the library from February 14th through June 2017. She left the library for a position of facility operations manager for the Dayton Metro Library. We're excited to welcome back Angela to this library. And that concludes the report.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Hendon. Thank you all for a long meeting this morning. Again, if you have any follow-up, we will be bringing the report to the full board next Tuesday. And those non-information items, those action items will be the things that we're moving forward on. And David, Rick, and Jay will be back to talk to the full board about the overall presentation. Again, slightly abbreviated version. So if you have any input on that, that's great.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Questions. One is, what does PLF stand for? PLF.
That's the Public Library Fund. So in Ohio, our funding is about 50, our funding specifically is about 50% at the state level. And that comes as the PLF, which is currently set at 1.7% of the general revenue fund for the state. And that is divided up among the 251 public libraries in Ohio according to a formula. It's currently, not to go on, but it's currently set to regress back to 1.66%, which is permanent law in this budget year. So we are working hard to maintain what we can. And the PLF is important for everything we do in funding all of these projects. It rises and falls with the state. So we're hoping not to have a cut specifically targeted to that. But if the revenue at the state level changes, that would change that. That said, the Enquirer just this morning had an article from the state's perspective about the budget situation. I believe Governor DeWine's going to introduce his budget, maybe even today, or some budget priorities, that it did not suffer from the implosion that had been assumed it might. So we received a very stable PLF fund that is much more robust than we had anticipated or really been instructed to anticipate when the pandemic began. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Well, you know that inside and out. The other question I had is, did Fifth Third gave us a new resolution? Did they send over like what the differences are, between what it used? Because I don't really prefer accepting a document if I don't know what they're changing. It's like, what's the red line version look like? So what's not in there that used to be in there, or what's in there?
Yeah, I can share that with you. Our previous version was very high level, did not get into very many specifics. This actually addresses every specific detail. And
Okay.
our version that we've been using is a version we've probably been using for 20 or 25 years. And as banking rules change, they just want
It would
specific
just be
things called.
interesting to see where we were versus in the future for anything like this. Like, where were we and what are they recommending? Because, I don't have any idea. Gosh, I was just on here since May, but if it's been 30 years, none of us know.
Right, right.
Did these go through the prosecutor's office for approval anyway?
What did you say, Diane?
Do these go through the prosecutor's office for
Yeah,
approval?
yes. We don't sign anything unless they've looked at it.
That's what I thought. Okay,
Well,
thanks.
I had a similar question as Greg's because I was like I wonder what the changes are and if they're substantive or if they are, I think what you're saying is listing all the fancy things banks do now compared to
Right.
10 years ago. But I agree with Greg, we should be having some type of comparison for our
Yes.
information.
And our
Yep.
last one was in the December board meeting. And like I said, it's very high level. And I think for our purposes, we tried to keep it as high level and not as detailed. And the bank has been okay with that until now. So,
But I think that's really a good point for some context. Judge Allen on the HR committee, we often will present what the policy was and what the new policy is. So I hear what you're saying. That's a good comparison. Thank you. Okay, great questions. I think I will stop sharing my screen. And if there are no other questions, we can close the meeting down. And thank you all. Again, apologies on the scheduling and all the back and forth on that. I really appreciate you. And this morning when I woke up with the snow, I have to say I was happy that we were doing this one virtually because I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if anybody was here when we did that one out in Miami Township and there was like a snowstorm and it was crazy and 50 was closed down. And I thought, oh geez. So thank you all for coming this morning and we will talk to you soon.
I'm sticking around.